Hi, in this lesson, I'm going to talk about how you can find an organization to work with for City Vision courses. And I want to explain a little bit about our overall philosophy of learning and just in general learning theory overall. So there's three domains of learning. Often it's, people call it the head, the heart, and the hand. The technical terms are cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor domain. And online learning is great for head learning, but it is very limited for heart learning and hand learning unless you actually go out and do things. So basically, we put a strong emphasis, especially on the hand learning. We're very practical focused, and but on the heart learning, a lot of the things we try to do: journal or reflective assignments, faculty mentoring, living and working in a community, from work or church. In the hand learning, we follow a philosophy called constructionist learning, and that's that people often, especially adults, learn best by building something, and you learn the tools you learn the techniques as you're building, and you need a real world organization to work with. So there's a lot of schools you can go to where you do 100% head learning, and then you go out and get a job and you can't get employed because you don't know how to actually do this stuff. So let me just use this as an example. So would you trust online learning for learning to ride a bike? Well, I don't know. Let's talk about that. Or flying a plane. If your pilot said, you guys are my first, flight that I'm going to be doing, but don't worry, I went to a really good 4-year online school, right? You'd probably be a little bit nervous. What about managing an organization that transforms lives, like a lot of you are doing? I actually think it's easier to fly a plane than it is to manage an organization that transforms lives. So how do you trust online learning for that? Well, it depends. Ultimately, people who fly, they can do flight simulators. So, the translation of that would be practical assignments in real organizations. We're trying to create the flight simulator for, you learning in a nonprofit organization. So the other thing for a pilot is they require practice flight time. And we have internships that you can do. And then, the last thing would be flight experience. And that's going to be getting a job in a nonprofit or ministry. So a good number of our students are already at a nonprofit or ministry. But if you're not, we're going to really try to help you find organizations that you can work with in these three domains over here. So let me just talk about all the courses we have that require working with a nonprofit organization or ministry. So we have cross-cultural management and ministry. So you develop a cross-cultural strategic plan. Nonprofit human resources, you develop a manager's HR toolkit. Organizational behavior, you do an organizational cultural assessment. Leadership in diverse and under-resourced communities, you have a diversity strategic plan. Nonprofit startup and board development, you have a board development manual. Nonprofit financial accounting, you review financials. Marketing, you develop a marketing plan. Grant writing, you develop a grant proposal. Nonprofit fundraising, you develop a fundraising plan. Nonprofit managerial accounting, you review financials. Social entrepreneurship, you develop a new program, product, or organization. Nonprofit strategic planning, you're going to be developing a strategic plan. So if you don't have a nonprofit to work with, it's a little bit like taking an online course and learning to ride a bike. You're going to learn the techniques, but you need to get on the bike. So we really need you to find an organization to work with. So that's going to be one of your most important things that you're going to do. So if you're already with an organization, then that's great. A lot of organizations aren't going to provide an opportunity for you to do all these things. They may not be large enough. They may not have all these components. You might be at a small church, and the idea of having a plan for each one of these, if there's only one part-time pastor, isn't likely. But then other of you might be at an organization where this is good. So we separate out our students into two groups. So if you're currently staff or volunteer leadership in a nonprofit or ministry, a lot of people might be in leadership at a church as a volunteer, but you're still in leadership, so you have a lot of access. So you're going to be able to use your organization for many projects. There may be some that might be difficult, doing grant writing or accounting or board development or fundraising. You might still need to find an outside organization. And then group 2 is going to be if you're not staff or in volunteer leadership and nonprofit ministry, you're going to need to find one or more nonprofit organizations to work with on practical assignments. So we want you to do this as soon as possible and to invest a lot of effort. In our introduction to nonprofit management, if a student spent 20 to 40 hours on this project, then I would say that's really well spent time. So it may be very difficult, but it could be the most important single thing you could do to improve your educational experience. And the other thing that we found is that students that don't develop relationships with nonprofit organizations and get effective practical experience have more difficulty in getting jobs. So how do you find an organization? If you are in group 2 and you don't have an organization, or if your organization is smaller in a church, you're going to need to find an organization to work with. I've worked with a lot of students. There's a lot of students that do not like cold calling organizations, but it's an important professional skill for networking. You need to be able to cold call. So if you do this and you've called more than 50 organizations and and I put an and in there, and you've reached more than 20 organizations and you've still been rejected, then talk with your faculty, because you're probably doing something wrong. So there are advantages to working with a local organization, and one of the advantages would be if you don't have a job, you should view finding this organization as a huge opportunity for you to potentially find a future employer. What we want to do is we want our students to be like, the story I always loved was in the Great Depression of the guy who he didn't have any job, so he went to a grocery store and he said, "I'll work for you for free." And after a couple months of working for free, he worked so hard that they decided to hire him. Now, I realize people can be exploited doing that, but if you go and, I've run an organization, I've had hundreds of interns that I've worked with, and if I see an intern that is doing outstanding performance, I'm going to try to hire that person. I'm going to find a way to hire that person. So I would encourage you to, try to have this servant's heart as you're working with them. Ultimately, how effective you're going to be is going to be determined by two factors. One is how many organizations you call. It's, basically gets down to numbers, but then how effective are you at pitching yourself via phone? That's a really important skill. So I'm going to talk with you about some of the steps, and we have detailed instructions, but step 1 is getting to the right person. This is actually probably the step that most people make a mistake on, is they call the organization and they say, I called 20 organizations and I left voicemail. Most nonprofits don't return their voicemail. So you should assume if you called and left a voicemail, no one's going to respond. So you need to call at different times of day. You need to look at different sizes of organizations. And if you do get a hold of the person, then you need to find someone who is externally facing. So a volunteer intern coordinator often will be very friendly. A human resources person often, can be good. And an executive director or someone in a position that you would one day like to be in. Say you're a program person, you want to, run a program, you could find that. So what you do is you go on their website, you identify who it is you want to talk with, and whenever you call and say, "Can I speak to so-and-so?" And they, if they ask what's this involved, and you could say, "I'm a student at City Vision University. We have an assignment to contact an organization," and hopefully, what most people who answer the phone are trying to do is they're trying to filter for people who are trying to sell things. So we provide a sample script, and I'll show you that link. And then the next step is interviewing the right person. So while your initial purpose is to interview them, the secondary purpose is that you're pitching to them the value of working with you on your project. So if I'm working for an organization, and I had students work with me at a nonprofit, and they actually did a really good job, and it made me want to work with them on another project. But the longer term purpose is that you're networking to develop relationships with an organization that could serve as an internship site or even a future employer. If nothing else, just an organization that's good to know. And focus on how you and your projects can serve the organization. And you want to try to, if you work with someone on the first assignment, you want to try to get them to buy in. So they'll say, I may have another assignment in grant writing. Could you help me find someone else? Now, one other thing I might add is if you've contacted the local organizations and you can't find anyone, these days you can work with organizations remotely. So you could just call people in, the nearest biggest city, or go to any city. You could find someone at, any organization. Now, sometimes students will pick organizations that are too large or too small. If you try to, contact the United Way national headquarters or the American Cancer Society national headquarters, they might have 10,000 employees. You're going to have a hard time getting to the right person. Or if you call the nonprofit that everyone's a volunteer and no one ever answers the phone, then you're going to have a problem getting to the right person. So we have this instruction sheet that I'm going to go ahead and show you. So this instruction sheet's linked in your assignment. It's also linked in the bottom of this video. So if you're looking at this video on YouTube, then you can click the link below the video. And what it's going to do is it has step instructions. What group are you in? Now, if you are in group 1, you're going to follow a different set of instructions. And you can follow these instructions. But what you're really looking for there is you want to talk to someone in your organization that might be in a position you want to be in someday. If you're in group 2, then what you're going to do is you're going to create a list of nonprofit organizations that you might want to work with. And, here's a list of sites that you can potentially find them in, and, searches on Google. And ultimately, you want to, contact them and try to connect to them. So I provided more details on getting to the right person, interviewing that person. I have a list of questions, and then you're going to take notes on that for your assignment. So ultimately, if you are interested in doing an internship, we have a course, Internship Practicum course. You can only take an Internship Practicum course if you've completed Introduction to Nonprofit Management. That's step number 1. You have room in your degree program for elective courses, and you found someone within a nonprofit organization, church, or ministry that will sign our supervision agreement. So that could be your current employer, if you work for an appropriate employer, or you could serve as an intern. And I recommend, and we're going to put this in the supervisor agreement, that you be willing to volunteer 10 hours a week. Now, normally our courses are supposed to take 17 hours a week. So what we're really saying is you're going to spend 10 hours a week doing your work, then you're going to journal about it during the remaining 7 hours a week, and do some other assignments. And then that's going to count towards your work. So even though you're volunteering, that's going to count towards your work time. And the basic course structure is you're going to have weekly journaling, reflection on work. You're going to have a work log that's signed off on by a supervisor with 10 hours a week counting, and we'll have some reading material relevant to internship. So starting in 2021, we're going to have the Internship Practicum course available every term, and it can be taken for a second time, but with a different course number. So if you have any questions, just ask your faculty member. Thanks a lot. Bye.